Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available in Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload. Shall we? Today's one and only experience. Just so that you have an idea of my background knowledge and experience, I grew up all over the rural southern United States, from the Appalachian Mountains to the swamps, backwoods, and bayous of the Deep South, where I spent most of my free time deep in the woods up until my early 20s. I spent a lot of my time hiking, camping, hunting, and fishing, and I've always felt at home and at peace, miles from nowhere. The more remote, the better. I'm well educated. I have a degree in the field of science, and I've seen a variety of wildlife like coyote, wolves, panther, and bear in the wild. When I was about 17 years old, my family moved to the Florida Panhandle. The woods in that area and around my house went on for many, many miles and are only interrupted by the occasional creek, river, country road, and farm. There really are miles of woods to see and very little traffic out there. I was told by the locals that the area around my home had a special significance to the Native Americans, and on a few occasions people alluded to things being odd in the area, but no one ever told me anything specific. If anything, the few who seemed to know anything got weird and quiet if I pressed them about why they made remarks about the woods, so I dismissed it and lived my outdoor life as normally as I would. On one occasion, some of my friends came over to our property and decided to go camping. We went down to one of the creek bottoms a mile behind my home. We hung out for a while, but after remembering all of the water moccasins that hung out down there, I decided against camping out there out of concern that I may get bitten by a snake in the dark. There were a lot of cottonmouth down there, and they became more active at night. So around dusk, myself and another kid went back to the house, and the other two were going to camp out there at night. Probably an hour after dark, the other two showed up looking shaken. They said they were going to sleep inside as well. They seemed spooked, but when asked what happened and what was wrong, they got weird and clammed up. The next day, we went back to the creek bottom, goofed around, and did some teenage stuff. One of my friends had brought his rifle, which he seemed eager to try it out. It was one of those old Chinese SKSs. We were messing around the campsite they had abandoned the night before when one of them commented about seeing something that looked like an invisible thing from the movie The Predator. I thought they were being silly, but they were insistent. So we looked around and saw nothing. A little while later, the friend with the rifle shot up into the trees, which was immediately followed by a huge splash in the creek. When I looked at the creek, I saw large waves from the impact, like something had been thrown really large with a lot of force. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something brown and blurry in the creek, but before my eyes could even focus on it, nothing was there to be seen. Yet, there were waves still moving. It was weird. I was surprised. I didn't know that he intended to shoot at anything, and had been looking the other way. My other friends didn't seem to know what had just happened either. We asked him what had just happened, and he said that he had seen a large hairy thing on a large limb of the tree and shot at it. I know that was absolutely irresponsible of him. I asked him what he just shot. Was it a raccoon or something? No, he said. It looked like something out of the zoo, kind of like a big monkey or something, but it had a face and it was looking at me. I must have hit it because it fell into the creek. All of this happened in less than a minute, and we ran 25 feet over to the creek where Will had heard the splash. There was still a slight disturbance in the water, but we never saw anything. When I questioned the friend, he reiterated what he had seen, a hairy thing that reminded him of something similar to a baboon looking at him on the top large limb of the tree, but it repeated it had a face and it was looking at him. He repeated it had a face and it was looking at him. I asked him, what do you mean it had a face? Like a human face? He said, no. It wasn't a human, but it didn't look like an animal's face either. It looked like nothing I had ever seen before. It didn't even look like a monkey's face. It was different. We searched the banks and looked around, but didn't find anything. We even walked down the creek a good ways to see if he had killed something and maybe it floated away. But we never found anything, no blood, no tracks, no fur. But whatever had happened, he had irresponsibly shot at something, and even if out of surprise, it had fallen into the creek, but we never found a sign of it. It was shortly after this that things started to feel weird, a little eerie, and we called it a day. I never knew what to think of that event, and I think I had written it off as something had either just didn't make any sense or some kind of crazy or a very successful prank. I even asked the other two guys if they were screwing with me, and they swore up and down that they didn't know anything. One of them did see him fire the rifle, but didn't know what he was shooting at. He said that he had saw something fall in his peripheral, but when he looked into the creek, there was nothing there. Life continued on as normal, and I spent a lot of my free time hiking and exploring and looking for fishing holes off of that little creek. At some point in time after this, I started having weird experiences in the woods periodically. Sometimes, usually late in the day or at dusk, I would get this feeling like I was being watched. The feeling wasn't there most of the time. It would just happen on occasion. I started noticing that sometimes in the evening I would hear strange animal noises from the surrounding woods. A few times it sounded like blood-curdling screams. Once it sounded like the roar, and a few times it sounded like some type of odd bird-like cry, similar to that of a peacock. Being familiar with animals, I always tried to deduce what animal had made this various noise. I concluded that the screams must have been a panther, that the roar was a bear, but peacock noises made no sense. There were 3 neighbors within the next mile and a half on that isolated road, and none of them had peacock. Then late one evening, I heard more of an intimidating scream than before. It just sounded bizarre and caused me a sense of fear and dread. The scream sounded like a woman being murdered. I don't know how else to describe it. It was high-pitched, shrilly and loud, but it seemed too loud and lasted far too long to be a human. I figured it must have been a panther, but it didn't feel right and sent chills down my spine. It was during this last bit of twilight before total darkness, and I heard my ass back home. Sometime after, the occasional sense of being watched and followed began to feel stronger and more malevolent. On a couple of occasions after, when I was out in the woods, I felt that I was not just being watched, but I was being hunted, and that my life was in danger. I never saw or heard anything. The woods were always silent when this happened, and I always quickly made my way home, but made a point to walk, as I felt running may trigger a predator like a panther to chase me, if that's exactly what it was. Whatever it was, it felt like I was in imminent danger of death. It was a consuming feeling like nothing I had ever felt. One day during this time, my little brother and his friends came running excitedly to me and told me that two of them had seen a bear. Being that this area had been heavily hunted for many years, there are not supposed to be any bear anywhere near this part of Florida. I asked them what they saw. They said that they had turned around and had seen the hind end of something walking on all fours out of the edge of the forest. They only saw the very end of the creature and could only see the upper part of its back legs and its back right above its legs. They said that it was brown, it had hair, and it was far much bigger than a dog, so it must have been a bear. Again, there are no bear known to exist anywhere near here. At some point after this, I was out hiking again one day, and I made a point to bring my shotgun loaded with number 4 shot, which is the largest pellet that I had. I began carrying it while hiking as a precaution to whatever was out there. I was still leaning towards the panther. I didn't know what else it could have been that would stalk a human and go undetected. I had noticed that the strange feelings and various strange sounds seem to happen around dusk or at night, so I started making a point to get back home well before dark. This time I had stayed out a little too late. Dusk was beginning as I'm making my way home when I felt it again. Something was watching me. No, it felt like it was definitely after me. The level of fear and the senses that this thing triggered were completely different than anything I had ever felt. I knew I was being stalked, but I couldn't see or hear anything as I made my way home. Whatever the thing was, it seemed to move with me as I walked hundreds of yards, but the feeling had only grown stronger. I felt like my life was in peril, like something was about to lunge out and kill me. Every hair on my body seemed to stand on end. I felt certain that whatever it was, a shotgun was not going to stop it. Despite the terror I was feeling, I forced myself to stop and scan the woods, looking at both the ground and trees, thinking that I may see the panther nearby readying itself to pounce. There was nothing that I could see or hear. Everything was deathly quiet. It was about this time that I first remembered my inner voice saying, "Don't go, go, don't stop," My inner voice saying something like, "Don't stop, go, quick, don't run." I started praying as I was walking toward my home. In every fiber of my being, I felt this sense of malice and intent. Whatever this was, it wanted to kill me. I felt sheer terror, dread, in a way I'd never felt in my 17 years of life. Remember, I grew up in very rural areas full of remote, isolated spots. Those places were where I felt the most peace. Animals didn't scare me, but whatever this was, it did. That feeling was terrifying and consuming. It was all that I could do to walk home, clutching my useless shotgun, praying to God to protect me. And he did. Usually, when I got within 200 to 300 yards from the house, the feeling would subside. This time, the feeling followed me right up to about 50 yards from the house. I continued praying, and as I reached it, the feeling eased off, but I felt like whatever this was nearby and watching. From that day on, I started occasionally feeling this malevolent presence emanating from the nearby woods. Sometimes it didn't feel safe in my own yard at night. I remember one time when I walked into the backyard and heard the scream again. It sounded like a woman screaming in terror, only extremely loud, and it lasted too long to be a human. And then it transitioned to something like a baby crying, but the crying changed and became distorted and twisted, and it just felt and sounded like something that was wicked, and it was trying to frighten me. From that point on, I avoided the woods, especially while alone or in the evening. I turned to partying, trying to push the events from my mind. A year or two had passed without incident, and I had gotten too relaxed. Sometimes I'd get the occasional itch to go for a stroll at night. The moon was mostly full. The sky was clear with lots of stars. It was a bright, beautiful early autumn evening. I still had enough apprehension to stay out of the fields and woods, especially alone at night, so I decided to go for a walk down a rural country road. It was probably midnight. I had walked several hundred yards down the paved road, cut across the corner of someone's cow pasture to get to the dirt road. I'd gone through an electric fence and had made my way about 50 yards through a pasture when I heard something moving in an adjacent cornfield in the opposite side of the dirt road from that pasture. I stopped and listened and heard the sound of something big moving quickly through the corn rows. At first, I thought it may be a deer until I realized the steps and movements sounded bipedal and large. Several times it moved and then paused, then moved through the corn quickly again. After hearing that movement several times, suddenly the sound of movement was followed by the sound of a rabbit squealing. I instinctively crouched, peering into the darkness. Up until this moment, I had only been curious as to what kind of animal I had gotten close to. I had no way of fathoming what it was about to step out. I saw a large bipedal figure walk out of that cornfield. It crossed the dirt road, stepped over the electric fence mid-stride without a pause or effort. In the bright light of the moon and stars, I could make out some details. Its head had a significant wolf-like feature. A long snout and pointed ears. It was much taller than a human. I'd say 7 feet, possibly a little more. And it walked, leaning forward with its shoulders hunched forward, like it was slightly crouching. It was covered in fur, but the fur seemed thinner or shorter on much of its torso and arms. I remember noticing that it had very lean and powerful muscular build to this thing. Its arms seemed unusually long and hung low as it moved, and it clutched something in one of its arms. I couldn't make out its color because of the limited light, but it appeared to be very dark. I even noticed a tail or whatever. It had doubled knees. These creatures are often portrayed having. Despite being a semi-bright night, a lot of its body from its waist down was obstructed in shadow. It crouched on the ground, clutching its rabbit in both hands. And I started hearing a wet crunching noise and realized that it was eating the rabbit. It was squatting low to the ground, holding it in both hands, eating it like you may eat a fried chicken drumstick and thigh with 2 hands. At this point, I guess it couldn't have been more than 40 yards from me. It's hard to remember details you don't think about for many years. I had on camouflage jacket, jeans, and I remember trying to make myself as small as possible, crouching and hoping that it didn't notice me when it paused and sniffed the air as if it had smelled something. Then it raised its head and sniffed the air again. It was at this moment I thought, shit, I hope it's not smelling my scent. At that moment, it looked directly at me and emitted a low guttural growl. I swear its eyes flashed red, something I had never seen an animal do without light reflecting in them. It was less bright than when a light reflected directly into the animal's eyes, but distinct enough. I could see the red eyes briefly flicker in the darkness. This didn't appear to be reflected light. It appeared to come from within this creature for a split second and then disappear. Bizarre, I know. Looking directly at me, the creature stood up like it was challenging me and growled this low guttural growl that I heard from 40 yards or less away. At that moment, I felt fear overwhelming me. I had this overwhelming urge to haul ass back to my house, but something inside, something told me not to run. That if I did run, it would catch and kill me. When I previously told you about all of this, I said I felt hunted, and I felt the sense of an unnatural terror, like my life was about to be forfeited, and very suddenly and violent. Well, now, It was like I was looking at the source, eye to eye. Somehow I knew that this creature was bad, a very wicked thing, and far more powerful than me. And something like an inaudible voice kept telling me that if I ran, I would forfeit my life. Walk, don't run, pray, stay calm. These thoughts kept going through my head, but they were not coming from my conscious mind. I slowly backed out of the field, never turning my back to this creature until briefly when I had to cross the electric fence. Even then, I tried not to turn my back completely to it and keep one eye on it. At this point, it had moved deeper into the shadows of the pasture and was moving parallel to my direction. I would occasionally hear it move through the field, still staying parallel to me as I began to walk down the paved road toward my house. As I moved down the blacktop, I came to a section of woods with no homes or lights nearby. I had to walk through at least a few hundred yards of wooded road to get back to my house, and there was only one house on that way. No lights anywhere, nothing but woods. The thing tracked alongside of me the whole way, moving through those woods in darkness with absolute ease. Occasionally I would hear a branch crack or a swish of vegetation, and a few times it stopped to growl that low guttural growl at me. It's odd how I could hear its growl. I don't think I would have heard a dog growling at that distance. The entire time I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, fear, and inescapable death. I continued to listen to this internal voice and prayed hard the whole way. I kept telling myself to walk, not run, and to pray. I prayed. Oh, did I pray? I don't know if it was the voice of my intuition, but I somehow knew with absolute certainty that if I did run, this thing would kill me. There was something symbolic about the act of fleeing from this evil, and I knew if I did, everything I knew was over. As I walked through the dark wooded stretch of road, I remembered wondering if any of my remains would be found, and if so, would they be able to claim it? I kept feeling like I was going to be killed at any moment. Time seemed to drag on. It seemed to take forever until I got close to my house. I finally reached my driveway and even walked backwards up the hill to my house because I did not want to turn my back to this thing. Sure enough, it was across the road from my home, growling from the edge of the tree line and brush. I finally bolted when I got 10 yards from the door. I ran through the house, locking the doors and grabbing my old shotgun, even though I felt certain that the small game loads I had in it wouldn't do a thing but upset this creature even more. I was too afraid to look out the windows as I knew it was outside and feared seeing it looking back at me through my windows. That feeling this thing gave off was not just a dangerous one. It was an evil feeling, a feeling like a wicked, unnatural thing. I sat in my room and prayed, if memory serves, until dawn broke. A few weeks or months later, sorry I can't remember the specifics, my little sister came downstairs sometime around or after 1 a.m, white as a ghost and panic-stricken. She was terrified. You could see it all over her face. When I asked my family what was wrong, they told me she had seen a bear crouching outside of her window. She had woken up with a terrible feeling and knew something was watching her sleep. And when she looked out her window next to her bed, she saw a bear with large red eyes staring at her. My sister slept in a bedroom on the second floor, but the garage adjoining that part of the house was one story. Something had climbed on that roof of the garage and had been intently watching her through her window. I asked her point blank if she was sure it was a bear. I could tell she was terrified and didn't want to acknowledge something. She responded with, "It was covered in hair, had big red eyes, and was staring at me while I was sleeping through my window. I was asleep when I woke up with a feeling of terror. I knew something was watching me, and it felt bad." I'm paraphrasing, as This was many years ago, of course. I was generally afraid to go outside and even back in the woods around my house after that. But when I did summon up some courage, I would periodically have to abruptly stop hikes in the woods near the house. Everything would be fine, and then I would suddenly become overwhelmed with this ominous feeling that I was living on borrowed time. That creature was stalking me, and it was going to kill me. I almost always left immediately, feeling like the shotgun in my hands that I was carrying was useless. On multiple occasions, when this had happened, I felt the inner voice again, telling me to leave now, walk, don't run, and pray. On a couple of occasions that I lingered momentarily scanning the woods for this creature, and I never saw anything, but it felt like it was growing closer and danger grew more imminent, so I always left. It was around this time that I found someone's white domestic rabbit hanging from a tree branch in the woods, disemboweled, with its eyes plucked out. It was hanging from a branch, maybe 5 feet off the ground. It struck me that it was like it was meant to be seen or found, as if it was placed highly visible location right behind someone's property line, eye level, at the edge of the field, beside the woods where this thing seemed to frequent. It just seemed significant. It was about that time that I learned the Native Americans lived on a nearby adjacent property who were reputed to use blood magic. That was evil and bad stuff. It is evil and bad. I was told by another Native American who told me to stay away from them. I am part Native as well. We lived near a reservation, and multiple natives had told me about someone who they knew was a shapeshifter. Someone who had reportedly demonstrated their ability to shift into animals, and they had ties to this family. A few times someone told me something like that. They always acted like it was a taboo thing and they shouldn't be speaking about it. I don't know if that's relevant, but it feels like it all may be connected. A couple of years later, a friend of mine came to pick me up and take me to the nearby city. We pulled out of my driveway after midnight, and right down the road from my house we saw a pair of huge wolves standing a few feet from the road, calmly watching us. Even staring at the car from a few feet away as we passed, their presence and behavior seemed and felt very unnatural, and my friend who had grown up here freaked out as well. He was pale, sweaty, and started stuttering, telling me, "Those are wolves. Those are huge." The only wolves in Florida are a few red wolves, which almost always look like large coyotes. They have a reddish-brown coloring and are very small for a wolf. These individuals were silvery gray and black, and I guess they could have weighed somewhere between 180 to 200 pounds. One was smaller than the other, and when I looked at them, I instinctively knew they were a pair, male and female. The red wolves aren't present anywhere near this part of Florida's panhandle, and this was something entirely different. I questioned my uncle, a state biologist and outdoorsman, and he told me there were a few red wolves in Florida. They were nowhere near that size, and there were none around here. Similarly, there were I hate that word. Sorry. There weren't any with red eyes, roof-sitting, window-paring bears in the area, as all of the bears in the area had been hunted out many years ago. I don't know what the true nature of what I experienced was, but it always left me with a sense that it had a very strong supernatural element. Yes, these things had physical forms, but there was something more, something supernatural. My friend knew something, but he was too terrified that all he would tell me is the natives in the area and that part of the woods was special to them, and he always got a terrified look, clam up, and change the subject. He used to have a house in that immediate area and said strange things happened there. Something bad around the house and something in those woods. He said that their house mysteriously burnt down one day while no one was home. They had to rebuild it, and it caught fire and burnt down a second time while no one was home. Whatever happened spooked him so much, they ended up buying a new home many miles away, and he was spooked to even think about it. When locals told me of natives who reportedly were shapeshifters, I began researching and learning that many tribes had beliefs in dark magic that would allow them to transform into something much like a skinwalker. These rituals are always dark rituals that involve blood, sacrifice, and some other dark or evil deeds. After that, I just stayed completely out of the woods around my house and didn't walk further than the barn behind the house at night. There will still be several incidents, more loud, piercing screams at night. Once or twice I heard a baby crying out in the woods during the middle of the night, as I thought to myself, that is no baby. Something's trying to lure me out there and mess with me. The sound changed from the very distinct sound of a baby into something wicked and unnatural, almost like an evil, twisted mockery of the sound of a baby crying. I felt that there was literally trying to mess with me, trying to instill terror, and let me know that it was there. One time, I had to talk to my brother and a friend out of going into the woods to look for the baby, and again, as soon as everyone agreed that there could possibly not be a baby crying that loudly in the woods in the middle of the night, the sound changed into something wicked which would curdle your blood. There was also another occasion where we heard puppies crying out from a ditch at the edge of the woods in the middle of the night. Once again, a couple of our friends wanted to rush out there and rescue the puppies, and once again, as I soon pointed out, that it couldn't possibly be puppies out there in the woods at night in BFE. The sound changed, and it was always wicked and terrifying. Almost like some evil thing was trying to recreate the most disturbing sounds it could. Shortly after this, I moved away and rarely visit that home, and all of my encounters of this nature ended when I left. Years later, that house was sold. Well, that was his experiences with what he believes is a Dogman. Once again, we'll go back to yesterday's topic of theories of where these creatures may come from. And demonic / religion, portal may be here for centuries. You know, there's supposed historic documentation of them going hand in hand with humans over the land bridge between Alaska and Russia. And transformation, you know. And I like how he worded that, much like skinwalkers, because obviously skinwalkers is the name for the Navajo. Navajo black witches, dark witches that practice black magic. Shapeshifters, all Native Americans have their own version of the skinwalker, but they're not skinwalkers. You know what I mean? It's a phrase frequently thrown out to, I guess, just encompassing all shape-shifting creatures, which is not true. It's, in my eyes, kind of disrespectful to the Navajo. You know, the Ojibwe have the bear walker, and I've talked about that thesis that I read about that. It was an amazing, it was an amazing 6-hour read, but it was really cool. So maybe that could be another theory or reason, or well, not reason. Explanation of where these things come from. Anyway, there's more to this, but not encounter. This is very interesting, and I like that he attached this. There are a lot of thoughts and beliefs that I have about these dogmen that I think need to be shared. You should not seek these things out. In my opinion, these are wicked creatures beyond most people's ability to handle. Number 2, I believe these creatures would love to kill us, if not eat us, but generally prevents them, or at least makes that difficult. If not eat us, but something generally prevents them. Sorry. I believe these creatures would love to kill us, if not eat us, but something generally prevents them, or at least makes that difficult. 3, these creatures have appeared in tangible bodies. They hunt and feed, and so it would make sense that they can be killed. However, I think attempting to kill one would take a lot of firepower, be extremely risky, and I have a feeling your problems would only get worse if you sought out one to kill it. Number 4, they would seem to have the ability to hide themselves from us exceedingly well. I've said that many times. Everything this guy's saying, we say on a daily basis on this channel. I say it when I go out in the woods. How do we not know that there's one? Actually, there's an amazing picture. I've got to share it with you guys. Not today, but I'll make a upload about it. A subscriber had watched the last time I was up to where Tom Mezek disappeared. And he didn't do anything crazy with the video. He just made it black and white, slowed it down, and watched. And there almost appears to be a Sasquatch or something similar to that walking kind of behind where I was, off to the side when I turned and panned around. Pretty interesting. Anyway, back to this. Sorry. Number 5, along with their ability to go unseen, they also seem to be either so evil that their presence creates a supernatural terror, or B, they have the ability to project terror. I'd never felt anything like this in my life. It was not a normal emotion. Number 6, every time my life sense seemed to be in jeopardy, that voice popped up and very firmly, plainly told me exactly what to do. On a couple of occasions, it repeated itself when I didn't do what it said immediately, or things seemed especially dire. Up until that time in my life, I cannot remember ever having these voices talk to me like that, giving me instructions or telling me what to do. Personally, I think it was God or your guardian angel. Just right there, an amazing sentence. Just, wow. Just right there is powerful. If you really think about how powerful that statement is. Whether it's praying or rebuking something in the name of Christ, sincerely turning to God seems to offer protection from these things. I've heard more than one person praying aloud or even rebuking them in the name of Christ has great effect. I would encourage any Christ-filled Christian who is troubled by Dogman to react as if it was an evil spirit. Good advice. Good. We all need faith. But there was another, I don't even want to call him researcher, channel, whatever, actor. Yeah, not a researcher, because what I do and what a lot of other people do is research. What this person does is just almost like voice acting and, using the subs to make himself appear more knowledgeable. Almost like a disc jockey, like a Howard Stern or whatever, just like a radio person. But them saying you don't need a firearm or any kind of protection, all you need is the word of God. Brother and sister, It's always nice to have the good Lord on your side. But you can't always rely on that when something's charging at you. Let's just say you can rebuke them in the name of God, Christ, whatever. But what happens if that thing disappears, but then a bear comes out? Or what happens if that rebuking doesn't work? It's always good to have both. Don't pretend to know I don't pretend to know the origin and nature of all of these creatures, but it should be remembered that there are a lot of occult practices that involve summoning them or transforming into something similar. There have also been sightings in areas where there is known dark occult activity. Skinwalkers out west, Beast of Bray Road, the one associated with the Bell Witch, or the one I encountered. They seem to have some type of tie to dark occult magic and or graveyards. There are rules for the demonic. If these things do have a connection to the demonic, then they need some type of foothold or permission to harm someone or their possessions without suffering repercussions. It's possible that someone allowing creatures to continually instill terror in them is granting it a foothold to their doorway. 10. This creature and many others reported seem to have the desire to instill terror. In many other accounts, the more terrorized the person, the more behavior escalates. 11. These creatures go to greater pains to remain unseen, especially during the day. It seems like being seen somehow makes them vulnerable. I don't fully understand, but I think it's worth looking into. And last of all, there are recorded accounts of these creatures and other man-beasts stretching from police reports of today to accounts going thousands of years spanning the globe. To assume all of these people, including law enforcement, are making something up or mistaking dogs and bears for something else is ignorant and willful ignorant. Or is arrogance and willful ignorance, Great. I mean, just this guy really knows, he's really thought this out. 90% of people in the West live in populated areas, even those who do not live close to populated areas. Sure, maybe you went to a state or national park, but that's not like living in a remote BFE and spending all of your time outside farming, logging, hunting like some people do. A lot of people who do live like this have seen things but don't want to talk about them. Generally, either they are too scared or don't want the negative attention or judgment that it will bring. I hope that when someone tries to say people are mistaking bears, wolves, and coyotes for dogmen, they realize insinuating that would be ignorant. Thousands and thousands of reports spanning the globe for thousands of years. To purpose that is to assume someone who didn't witness the event has a superior understanding to all of those who witnessed the events. Last, I don't know, but I wonder if some people confuse Dogman with Bigfoot. A lot of the time, the described behavior will sound like the atypical behavior of Dogman, climbing on roofs, stalking humans, twisted mimicking cries of people and animals, generally trying to terrorize people, if not actually harm someone. Most of the Bigfoot encounters I've heard of where they have actually seen the head of the creature know it's a Bigfoot. The Bigfoot just wants to be left alone, scare the person away, and at worst, maybe eat your pig. There are exceptions, of course, and I like that he put that. I really do, because they do. I think any creature wants to be left alone. But there are occasions when they do come in and they cross that threshold to instill terror. Dogman, on the other hand, from things I've experienced, there is nothing good about it. It is very sentient and cunning. Sentient and cunning. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what he said. And right here, perfect example. Jeff, what do you mean you agree with a lot of what he said? I mean, it sounded all great to me. It did. It sounded amazing. It sounded well thought out. He actually shared his encounter, and he shared his views and theory and feelings, right? Some of them didn't fit into my puzzle. Some did. So what did I do? I took the ones that fit into my puzzle and put them in my puzzle. The ones that didn't, I put in the box. Left aside here just in case my puzzle changes. And I might need that piece later. And that's what we should all do. And by doing that, I really think that things would get better in this community. Obviously, these creatures are dangerous. I mean, a 7 to 8 foot walking wolf with claws and teeth. I heard a story the other day. An amazing story. And for anyone to say, there are not animals out there nowadays that could harm us or animals that we haven't found yet, look at the Amazon jungle. There's a researcher that lives there, and he had made a statement that there are animals larger than humans in the Amazon that have not been classified yet. What'd that make me think of instantly? Dogman, Bigfoot. Also, the crazy story is, and this is terrifying, and I played this interview for my dad, and he loved it. He thought it was great. But this guy living in the Amazon is out hunting, which he shouldn't have been doing. He's got a shotgun. He's got his dog. And he's running. Dog's running. Comes around this corner. And he sees his dog. And there's this 5-foot creature with 2 kind of hook claws standing on its hind legs. And it had snapped his dog's neck. I think it was a giant anteater. Ha! Slashing at him. That's a monster. If you didn't know what that thing was, and it was almost dark, and you saw that thing, and it did that here, that's a monster. I really, honestly, I can't, sometimes I sit here and I'm like, how can people deny so many accounts and say that these things aren't real? And they've been talked about for thousands and thousands of years. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. And until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.